So with the season over, we are going to change it up a little bit to not stall for time, but get some material in. So we're going to start a series of interviews with people involved in the racing world. So, by the way, I'm DJ Fluck,
I am Eric Richardson.
and Eric is in a car.
Indeed, I am.
He,
Appropriate.
yeah, he's in a car right now because he had a flat tire today, and we'll see how long his cellular signal holds up for this. So, jump right in. Our guest today is an author who actually says he's not an author, but I'm holding two books with his name on the front of it. So please welcome the author of the ABC Racing and All About Race Cars, Andy Amendola of Red Racer Books. Excuse me. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you, DJ, and thank you, Eric. I'm so excited to be here.
It's I was saying right before we hit record, your Instagram ad worked. It popped up on our Instagram feed the one day, and I'm like, hey, that looks pretty cool. And I click over and I'm looking at it on Instagram, and we ended up with the All About Race Cars first, and then a couple days later, the ABCs of Racing showed up, and my kids really enjoy the books. And I was telling you when I reached out, I said my kid really, for some reason, is fascinated about tires, and I don't know why, but it's always, and it's like, hey, that's a slick. And I'm like, yeah, that's a slick. That's right. It's 4 years old and you're talking about slicks. So.
That's what I love. I love that.
So jumping right in, you on your feed, it's very clear you're a big F1 fan. Like, what got you into the sport?
Yeah, so it's a long story, but the short answer is Drive to Survive. I am admittedly a Drive to Survive, convert for F1 fan. I've known about F1. I've actually, it's crossed my path before in my career, because I work in marketing and I've had clients that actually sponsor some F1 teams, but I never really got into it until I watched Drive to Survive, and that really, broke down the barriers of the sport. Like it told the story of the drivers and the teams, and it was basically like a cheat code to get into F1. It really got me excited about it, and I realized there were so many layers to it, and that kicked everything off. Just like so many other people around the world and in the US, because we're having huge fan growth in the US for F1. That really started it for me, and after that it just became an obsession.
And they do just such an amazing job on the production value. We'll get into that here in a little bit, about why it's so successful and why it's so appealing. But I tell people, I'm like, I do not have a Netflix account, which shocks people. And I said, I haven't had a Netflix account in probably 7 or 8 years, which double shocks people. So I have never actually seen an episode of Drive to Survive. It just wasn't, I honestly didn't know it even existed. I was watching races and then like, oh, this Drive to Survive thing. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll not be cheap one day and check that out. But it seems like a lot of people have followed your path where, they kind of casual observer, and then, it sucked them right in. So,
Yeah.
And on top of that, do you have a favorite driver?
I have many. So I mean, Lewis Hamilton is my biggest inspiration for sure. Nice. Yeah, I mean, just beyond the track and everything he's done for the sport, he's a huge inspiration. He's my daughter's favorite driver. Our whole family loves him. But through Drive to Survive, I think some of my favorite drivers are probably like Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, Danny Ricciardo, of course. That really put him on the map in the US.
Yeah.
And now he's like America's favorite driver.
Yeah, it's just he's such a character, but it's unfortunate that he's going to be, in a reserve role next year. It's just unfortunate how that played out.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting, but we kind of got to see the backstory of all that in Drive to Survive. How he was struggling at Red Bull, and then he jumped to Renault, and then he jumped to McLaren. But I mean, he's a huge personality. I think that the sport owes him a lot because he was like that face that, welcomed so many Americans into the sport. And it helps that he loves America. He loves Austin, shows up in a cowboy hat and on a horse to a race. I mean, who does that? That's
Yeah.
that plays to the American,
It always has this kind of royalty kind of thing to it. And NASCAR has their stereotypical, Southern culture, but Formula One's always very proper and and then here he is in his Ricky Bobby helmet that he
exactly.
had for the US Grand Prix. So I've talked enough, Eric. I'm gonna spin it over to you here. He's still actually there.
Oh yeah, I am here. It's just amazing how Formula One grows and getting the young crowd involved. It's really fun to watch.
Yeah, I think they did such an amazing job. I mean, just Netflix told the story of those drivers in a way that was very palatable to Americans. It was like a Real Housewives, type drama. That just like, let us in. And then they started teaching us about the sport. And then after watching Drive to Survive, I just dove in. I started watching. I paid for F1 TV. And there's so much more beyond just those driver stories. There's the engineering part, there's the international aspect of it, there's the sponsorship, there's the fact that your teammate is your biggest opponent. There's so much to it. And I think, Drive to Survive was just kind of like that, cheat code or backdoor to get you into a sport that traditionally has high barriers. I think motorsports has a high barrier to entry. So I am Latin American. My family's from Uruguay, so I grew up in a house, of immigrants, and I didn't have the traditional American upbringing. But typically people are either born into a sport, like their parents went to a big college football town, and that's what their kids go into, or you play a sport and then you start following it. But F1 doesn't really exist in the US like football, baseball, basketball, and it's not like you can go racing on the weekends as a kid. That karting is not a big. Yeah, so I think Netflix was that key to unlock that audience and kind of break down those barriers and get you in. And then they've done a pretty good job of really like showcasing the drivers, making the sport, feel accessible in a way that it used to not be, in the Bernie Ecclestone era, where it's like very exclusive, they're starting to break those things down. And I think that's why it's starting to take off more.
On top of that too, like, you look back at the, US Grand Prix came in at the turn of the century, goes to Indianapolis, which, that's the logical place to do it if you're going to introduce Formula One into the US again after, so many years being out of it. And it just grinded to a halt with that last race where
the tire drama.
The tire drama. You had 14 out of 20 drivers pull off after the formation lap and just leave. And you have six drivers racing and just booing, and security's like, we might have a full-scale riot here. And I mean, it took some years to come back to the US. You had obviously COTA come around. But yeah, after that, I mean, it seemed like it was kind of, while it's very, very remained very popular worldwide, it seemed like there was a good decade in plus in the US where it was largely ignored by the mainstream.
Yeah, it was very quiet after that.
I mean, I remember I was, Eric and I were still living in Indiana at the time of that tire drama at Indianapolis, and I was just like, well, that sucks. And I didn't even really think twice about it. It's like, whatever. Indy's next May. Who cares? That was kind of my attitude about it at the time.
Look at what happened there in Indianapolis, and now what we have coming up with Las Vegas and the demand for attendance.
And $2,000 seats, $500 standing room only. Like it's absurd. It's so crazy. Like you tried to do that at even you look at the US, you Daytona, you look at Indianapolis, you could never get away with something like that.
Yeah, I don't
It
think
just
any other sporting event that you like outside of the Super Bowl,
yeah,
but
I mean
like
that's
I
about
mean,
it.
even like playoff basketball, like I mean, at those prices, you want to be courtside, basically. And
I mean, I
this will
think
get you like
those
maybe a slight view of one corner.
yeah, and it's I mean, obviously you have to run that race at night. You can't. That would be the worst idea ever, to go to Las Vegas and do it in the middle of the day, no lights on. It just looks like another downtown somewhere. You get that at night, and it's just there's the magic of Las Vegas if you've never been, and to see these cars just flying down Las Vegas Boulevard at 200 miles an hour or whatever it ends up being. It's just I wish I could go there, but my wallet cannot justify
Yeah.
me being there.
Yeah, I feel you on that. It's
Same
definitely
here.
going to be a spectacle.
I watch it on TV. Don't no doubt about it. I will 100% be awake and watching that on TV. But yeah, no, not this year. Maybe after a couple of years, if they still run it, the demand will sink a little bit. Maybe I can afford it then. But all right, we need to jump right into you wrote these two books. I said I found them on an Instagram ad. I ended up over at Amazon. Next thing I know, I have both of them in there. I'm reading to my kids. So what was the driving force behind wanting to write these books?
Yeah, so I mean, so I'm pretty new Formula One fan. I admit that. Drive to Survive fan. Me and my wife just watched the series on Netflix during the pandemic. Some friends told us about it, and it was on my radar, and we watched it. And after we finished the third season, we turned off the TV, and then we said, when is the next race? Let's see because I wanted to see what happened next. So we started watching, and the first race we watched was last year's Monaco race. And so we missed the first 4 or 5 races of that season, but we watched Monaco is like peak F1. It's historic, it's glamorous.
That Sunday is my favorite day of the year. It is the best day of the year from my standpoint, because one, my birthday is right around there. So it's usually my birthday weekend. Some days some years it falls on that day. So I'll wake up, you got Monaco. Then Monaco literally ends, and 20 minutes later, the Indianapolis 500 starts.
Right.
Then the Indianapolis 500's over, and then you turn on the Coca-Cola 600, and you've got like 5 hours of NASCAR. It's like all day racing.
I think that happened this year. It was like 3 races in one day. It was amazing.
That's how it falls. And it's my favorite day. And I tell my wife, I said, it's my birthday weekend. Don't you dare bother me. I will be on the couch all day.
Free pass.
I have a cooler with a case of beer next to the couch. I'm not going anywhere except to the bathroom.
Exactly.
It'll be next time around.
Yes, next year you are coming out. Eric is coming out here for that, so we'll do our all day binge.
Definitely. So that was our first race, and we watched it with the kids. We're in Miami, so like the races are pretty early in the morning, most of them. So get up, watch the race. That year was a pretty good race. There was some drama, and after that, we just started watching more races, and then I started getting into like my research phase, where I just like dig in, and I started like listening to podcasts, started following the news, and I started realizing, oh my God, this is really taking off in the US. Ratings are going up, everyone's talking about it. So I kept digging. I started sharing on social about my new fandom, and then my friends started like noticing, and like some like closet F1 fans came out and started saying, hey, you like F1 too? That's awesome. And I had a friend who invited me to a group chat with like 50 other F1 fans from Miami. And that really, was a game changer, because I started asking all these other fans who like been fans for a long time. And it was a very international crew. And, I started getting into it more. I started watching documentaries, movies, just full on research. And then after that, one of the things I do, because I have two kids, my daughter is 8, my son just turned 7. We read every night. And I, as a parent, like there's some books that are great and there's some books that are not so great,
Yes.
and I started buying them books, geared to what I like, so I purposely had a lot of intention into what I was getting them. And then I started looking for F1 books, and I literally struggled to
They don't
find good
exist.
ones.
They don't
Yeah, there is
exist.
not a lot, and they're very dated because F1 changes a lot. So I couldn't find good ones. And then, at that point, it was getting close to the fall. Miami announced I live in Miami, and my chat group ended up buying a block of tickets. So I started looking. The next race is in Austin. I was able to find GA tickets for not that much. I had a friend who moved from Miami to Austin,
There you go.
before the pandemic. So I hadn't seen him in 2 years. He was like, come out. And I was like, all right, let's go to this race. And I went to the race 2021 in Austin, and it blew me away. It was my first Grand Prix. It was amazing. I had a great experience. Austin is a special place. I've been there before many times, but like going to COTA, it was a real racing experience, and everyone was there for the race. And later I found out that most of the people who went were first time, Grand Prix F1 fans. And then I started after that was a huge turning point for me. I realized this is taking off. And then, Las Vegas was announced. So we went from 1 race in the US to 3. And I was like, okay, there's no kids' books about it. I'm really into this. And,
There's a market.
I want to do something. And then I realized there's a lot of opportunity with F1. It's not just, I didn't want to just talk about, racing, but there's a lot of STEM components that I really became fascinated with, because it's not just a driver's, competition. There's a whole engineering competition, and it's like super high tech and all performance driven, and every little piece of the car is, intentional and has an effect on your time. So I fell in love with that side of it, and I realized, hey, motorsports is a really good platform to engage kids with things like STEM, but then there's other opportunities like diversity and inclusion because of the lack of female drivers,
Oh yeah.
And there's other things like competition sportsmanship and all that can be worked into these books. So I saw a gap, and I went for it. And then that's after that race, I realized I want to create a whole platform, a whole series of books. F1 is where I started, and I hope to build out other motorsports leagues. But, if I had grown up, because I loved cars growing up, loved them. I was obsessed. And I got my driver's license as soon as I turned, my permit as 15, driver's license 16. And I loved driving, but I didn't know about the engineering side. And so I wanted to kind of create something that got kids excited about not just the excitement of racing, but also everything that happens in the sport beyond the racing, the engineering and the opportunities and all that. And the international piece was really exciting to me too. So after that race, I had a turning point, and I started writing.
And for the record, I mean, you said, I think you said this already, that you are not an engineer. You do not have a technical background. But I have to say, like, this book is very well laid out. The explanations are written very well that kids can understand it, but it's also educational for adults too. I mean, it is very, very well done. I have to let you know that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
But it's, my kids, I'll say, all right, what are we reading tonight? And they'll, I mean, not every night, but they'll run over and they'll grab this off the bookshelf, or they'll grab the ABCs off the bookshelf. And I mean, it got their attention, and my kids can't focus for more than 10 seconds without a TV. So it's like, the other thing too, which is also what appealed to me is the bright colors and the fancy, you know, designs. And that's so easy to hook the kids in. You walk around in like NASCAR, you have a bright yellow M&M's car. I mean, what kid's not gonna love that?
Exactly, exactly. And I have to thank my illustrator for that. I had a vision for what I wanted. I, I grew up loving those posters, those like vintage F1 racing posters, like the Monaco poster, and like all the race posters. Like that's what I remembered. And I wanted to create something like that. And it took me a while to find the right illustrator, but um when I did, Wei Ren is his name. He's based in China. He knocked it out of the
Oh,
park.
absolutely. So
And
well done.
and I think illustrations are so important for kids' books. That's what really gets them excited and gets their attention. And then the learning comes through the text, but it's almost an afterthought. It's almost like subtle. It's like repetition, they'll get it, but the illustrations hook them. And I had a vision for it. F1 has a style and a look, and I wanted to have a very cool kind of design approach for the books, and I was lucky that it came out as well as it did.
And the other thing I noticed when I was looking through it, in one of the books, it looks like it was self-published, but it looks like in the second one, you had a publisher you worked with. So did you pick that up along, Palmetto Publishing? Did you pick that up along the way? Like how did you go from self-published to having a publisher with that?
So I don't have a publisher. So
Oh.
yeah, so I am fully self-published.
Okay.
Palmetto Publishing is my printer. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, what happened was, and to give you a little context about how the book business works, there's kind of two routes. There's the traditional publishing route, which is like, you try to pitch a story or your manuscript to, Penguin, Random House, Scholastic, one of these big publishers. But that process from the time you sell your manuscript to the time the books get printed is like 2 years.
Right.
And I wanted the books to be ready for the Miami Grand Prix because I had left Austin in October ready to write these books, and I wanted them to be ready in May because that's when the Miami Grand Prix launched. So I investigated, I researched, I talked to a lot of people, and I found out I could self-publish. I could have a lot more control over the actual contents of the books, the illustration, and then I could just print them with, Palmetto is my printer.
Okay.
And that's how I approached it. Obviously there's a lot of investment that I have to do up front to do the self-publishing route.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I launched on Kickstarter. So Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform. Mm-hmm. It's like GoFundMe, similar to that. But basically in February, I launched a Kickstarter and, tried to generate funding for the books. And it was actually one of the hardest things I've ever done because Kickstarter.
I've tried and failed at that myself, actually.
Yeah, it is
hard.
Oh my God.
It is
hard. It is so much work. And I probably set my goal too high and like my time too short.
Yep.
But it was very challenging, but I learned so much, and it was incredibly fulfilling because I met so many people. I connected with potential customers, which are my backers. And like, I still am so thankful for my backers for, that helped me get started. So I've basically, after that, I started selling, e-commerce, got my books on Amazon eventually. But I've done it all myself. And then I try to create a brand out of Red Racer Books. I trademarked it. And my goal is to create more and more and more books out of this series. But it really started from, self-publishing and Kickstarter and with the help of people like you, like the community around motorsports, I found it's incredibly rich. It's incredibly helpful. Everybody's been great. I'll message people, I'll DM people, and people get back to me. It's like, I was amazed. Like it reinvigorated my like faith in community and humanity. After coming out of the pandemic, which was a dark period for so many people, but I found so much supporting community doing it, and hearing, like feedback from you and your kids, like that's what keeps me going.
That's so cool. I mean, it's just, we going into the esports world and coming in, it's, there's definitely toxic people out there, but there's far more people that we've met through this process that, we pretty, sorry, it's yelling.
And just the group that we're running with has been helpful.
Yeah, I just, we've been working together with people. It just, yeah, it's a community. Absolutely. So, Eric, I'll turn it over to you for a second.
I think I'm lagging a little behind, so I'm kind of missing in and out. I'm looking forward to when my son gets older to being able to start reading and looking at pictures in the books.
It's never too early to start reading to your kids.
Oh, we read a lot.
It is never too early to start reading with kids. Absolutely. Earlier the better. I would,
Oh, for sure.
I didn't take that seriously when I was young, and it took me a long time to get back into reading. And part of it was, as Eric and I went all the way through high school together, the material we were forced to read sucked, frankly. But when you get to pick out the material, it's much more fun.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like that's kind of what happened with me. I started taking the lead, and like I buy more books than my wife does. Typically, it's the mom who buys a lot of the books for the kids, but I just started buying books that I wanted to read with my kids. And I found out that I learned so much stuff just reading with them. So I wanted to, kind of contribute to that.
Yeah, I'm going to be that exact same route of picking up books about racing and sports and all those fun things too.
Exactly. It makes bedtime a lot more fun. That's for sure.
And I really like, especially with the racing, it's not just, oh, they're going in circles. You're right. There is so much of that engineering and science and technology side that is a huge and growing field, and they can expand on that as they go through school.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's so much opportunity on that side, especially as we're like, transitioning into electric cars. Formula E is growing. There's a lot of there's just so much that racing and motorsports as a platform can offer to young kids. And I think that's like, if we can start them young on learning about those things and kind of expanding their horizons and understanding, about how, like, there's this global sports, and then there's different teams and how you compete and sportsmanship, and then there's like the engineering side of it, and physics, science, technology, all that stuff. I mean, if I had known about that as when I was a kid, I might have ended up in a totally different career. I didn't realize that there was these things out there.
Yeah, for sure.
And I
So
think learning their entry points would be huge for kids as they grow up, and understanding what options they have.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of my goal, and that's why, like, I want to make the books, show like female characters as well, so that it's not just a boys thing, because today, there's not a lot of women drivers out there, but there's gonna be more, because there's definitely space for it.
And you asked for a go-kart for Christmas, didn't you?
That sounds awesome. I think
mommy said no. I said yes. Now I'm in trouble.
my son also asked for so
I'm already asking my wife if I can get one for my 3.5-month-old.
We might need to wait a little bit on that one, but I hear the stories, oh, this 4-year-old's a karting champ. I'm like I was tripping over my feet at 4. How are you how are you a go-kart champ at 4? Like that. But
well, that's the thing. I mean, Sebastian Vettel, I think, started at age 3, Ayrton Senna at age 4.
Yeah, it's just
like
crazy.
There's these, yeah.
You want to be a go-kart champion?
Oh, yeah.
we got some antsy kids, so we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping this up. So what's the future for Red Racer?
So the future is expansion into more motorsports. You know, I'm working on an ABCs of IndyCar. You know, open wheel racing is taking off in the US, and IndyCar is kind of the next logical spot after F1. We're actually seeing a lot of F1 drivers come into F1. I mean, into IndyCar, and McLaren has a huge presence there. It's incredibly competitive, and I'm really getting into it. So that's something I definitely want to write about. I'm also in the process of translating the books. So the first ABC book is in English and in Spanish, but I'm actually working with some of my customers to write the ABCs in Dutch, Italian, French, and Portuguese. You know, after I released the first books, I started getting some hand raises, and people were asking, "Hey, are you gonna do one? You should do one in Dutch. You know, Max is world champion. He's gonna be world champion again. You should do one. You should, you know." So, and like, I asked those people, I was like, "Can you help me with that? Because I don't speak Dutch." You know, so I'm actually trying to kind of crowdsource these translations, and that's kind of the plan. Like, I'm trying to grow the series beyond just F1 into other leagues and other languages, and go from there. You know, I'm having a blast doing it. I've met so many amazing people, and it's probably the most fun I've had in a long time, to be honest.
I can imagine. So where do we find the books? Where do we find you on social media?
Yeah, so the books are available at redracerbooks.com. That's where I sell them, and right now I have a deal. Red 30 will give you 30% off. Ship free is free shipping, and you can combine those. So we're having some nice holiday sales.
There you go. Good
We're
stocking
also
stuffer.
exactly, yeah, and we're also available on Amazon. It's sold at some independent bookstores in Miami, but primarily it's e-commerce for now. And if you want to find me on social media, I'm at Red Racer Books.
There you go.
Yeah, I try to post often, engage with the community, and it's been a lot of fun. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out, because I love meeting new people, connecting with people, and kind of growing the community.
Awesome. So the books are the ABCs of Racing and All About Race Cars. Andy Amendola, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and wrap up the show for today. I've got antsy kids here with me. I've got one screaming in the background. So check us out at FR Racing Online on social media, frracingonline.com. Check out our new reviews of Extreme Sim Racing, our partners' new equipments, racing stands, pedal retrofit kits. We've got that all on the blog. So be sure to check that out. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. Take care, everybody.